The establishment media is now trying to force feed us Biden 2020. So this is in Politico. Take a look. Joe Biden's platform for 2020, anti-populism. By criticizing the views of both Bernie-crats and Trumpites, Biden is positioning himself as the antidote to populism in all its forms and flavors. So I could do an hour talking about just that headline. And Adam Johnson of FAIR wrote a really interesting article about the term populism, which mainstream media has, absolutely abused and destroyed. And he says they use it to launder basically fascists and equate them to people like Bernie Sanders. And, I actually use the label populist to describe myself. I say I'm populist left. And the reason I do that is because the definition of populism is caring about the concerns of ordinary people. And so I actually agree with the point that Barack Obama made a while ago during the 2016 election when he said Donald Trump is not a populist. The real populist is Bernie Sanders. Well, now, it's clear the way that mainstream media uses this. And what they try to do is equate the tone of somebody like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and the fact that they portray themselves as anti-establishment and anti-elite, and they try to link them using the horseshoe theory of politics. So they go, hey, if you go far left enough, those people are exactly like the far right. And if you go far right enough, those people are exactly like the far left. So Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are equally unhinged. And that's a complete and utter bullshit framing. One of those two rails against the elites in a literal economic sense, where he says, hey, wealth and capital controls everything. Corporations and billionaires really do control our political system. They basically buy laws that screw over the little guy and help them. Whereas the so-called elites that Donald Trump rails against, they're effectively cultural elites. So, hey, I'm going to rail against fucking Hollywood, and I'm going to rail against Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to pretend like there's this giant conspiracy of like the Muslim Brotherhood and Jewish people. Honestly, a lot of people on the right think that Jews secretly run the world. A lot of people on the far right. So there's this Agenda 21 UN conspiracy-like thing where all these disaffected groups are actually secretly running everything. And that's not a version of elite that is actually in control and running shit. So it's a bullshit election strategy where you pretend like, oh my God, it's the cultural elites, it's the Democrats, they secretly run everything, and we need to rail against them. And it's like, no, as you're serving the economic elites and the establishment, appointing Goldman Sachs into your administration, doing the bidding of Wall Street, cutting the taxes of billionaires and corporations, as you're doing their bidding, you're trying to pretend like you're anti-elite. So you're doing the bidding of the economic elites while you rail against elites. It's honestly just a run-of-the-mill con man trick. And unfortunately, it works really well with Donald Trump. But now we're even seeing this, and we'll get to this later in the show, with the newly elected president of Brazil, Bolsonaro. He's basically an open fascist. And I've already seen headlines calling him a populist. He's not a populist. Stop using populist to describe, far-right authoritarians. People who are sympathetic to dictatorship. People who are honestly, in many cases, openly fascist. So they use this word to basically launder fascism and equate it to social democracy. And, I think Adam Johnson's answer to that is let's just stop using the term populist. I disagree with him on that point. I agree with him on everything else. But on that point, I would say just use the term properly. So if populism is caring about the concerns of ordinary people, then the real populist is Bernie Sanders. And it is not these, like Steve Bannon and Donald Trump. Now, look at what they're doing here when it comes to Joe Biden. They're taking the term populist, and they're using it as a pejorative, and they're portraying him as like, I am the savior coming in on a white horse to save you from the people who have a harsh tone. And it's like, the tone is irrelevant. Look at their actual policy substance. So, yes, people do need saving from the far-right fake populists like Donald Trump, and we need better politicians. But they do not. Bernie is the solution to that. But he's portraying it as, oh, no, they're equally bad, and I'm here to be I'm just the reasonable, centrist moderate. So, like, yeah, trust me because I'm a corporatist and I love the status quo. And, like, that's obviously what we need. It's so fucking lazy, man. It's so lazy. Okay, now, you might think, well, perhaps that headline is a little misleading. What does the substance of the article say? Well, let's take a look. So this is in Politico. They say, on Monday, former Vice President Joe Biden wrote a blog post that proves two things. Blogging isn't dead, and neither is Biden's political career. In fact, in Biden's essay and in other little-noticed public pronouncements, you can see him sculpting a role for the 2020 presidential campaign that perhaps only he could get away with playing. The voice of anti-populism. Though Biden's essay was largely ignored amid the constant hum of Trump-related stories, it made a bit of news in wonk circles because Biden used it to announce his opposition to a universal basic income. What a hero you are, Joe. That newly vogue policy proposal in which every American would receive a periodic check from the government regardless of their work status. But there's more in the post to decipher. Biden criticized Silicon Valley executives who have championed universal basic income for selling American workers short and undermining the dignity of work. He recoiled at rhetoric often wielded by Senator Bernie Sanders and his acolytes that demonizes corporations. Some want to single out big corporations for all the blame, but consumers, workers, and leaders have the power to hold every corporation to a higher standard, not simply cast business as the enemy. And he cut against the prevailing sentiment among Trump-friendly working-class whites that not everyone should go to college. Quote, cognitive capacity as opposed to brawn continues to become a surer path to climb that ladder into the middle class. So I need you to understand something. The whole point of this article is they didn't learn the lesson of 2016. They're not going to learn the lesson of 2016. They're always going to take away the exact wrong conclusion. So what we learned in 2016 is you cannot defeat the far right, you cannot defeat the Trump-like Republicans with the center, with so-called moderates, with corporatists, with status quo enthusiasts, because those are the people that actually led to the rise of Donald Trump. The lesson that they took away was, no, if anything, Bernie Sanders forced Hillary Clinton too far to the left. So what we need is somebody to come in on the Democratic side who's even more moderate, even more centrist, even more pro-status quo, and that's the way to defeat Donald Trump. And oh yeah, the cherry on top is, aren't Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders basically the same thing? They're never going to learn. Listen, they smugly think that this blog post makes Biden a hero. Like, finally, a reasonable person stepping up and saying, shouldn't working class Americans have to put in more hours and bust their ass to get nothing in return? Like, he thinks it's a bold stand, like, I'm against universal basic income. Oh, wow. What a fucking hero you are. What a hero you are. It really... The establishment is beyond clueless. And by the way, make no mistake about it, this is top down. The idea that, like, you know, regular folks are sitting around and going, oh, did you read that Biden blog post where he's against universal basic income and he's defending corporations? What a reasonable human being. No, this is literally the establishment media sitting down with people who are in Joe Biden's camp and Joe Biden's people pitching establishment media people, hey, we need to try to make Joe Biden 2020 a thing. So how about you guys run a puff piece on him to talk about how awesome he is and how reasonable he is, and we'll sit over here and pretend like it's all grassroots. It's not grassroots. And this is definitely a concerted effort, because I've already seen polls. Anytime, for the longest time, when the polls showed Bernie Sanders being the front runner by 1.5 miles in the 2020 election on the Democratic side. Well, what happened recently? Well, recently there's been a few polls that had Biden in front, and then there was one that had Biden way in front. So I was like, wow, that's an anomaly. Every poll shows Bernie Sanders. What the fuck is going on here? Well, come to find out, when you dig into the methodology, they way oversampled older people. So they left out millennials, and they way oversampled registered Democrats, and they left out independents. So Bernie Sanders' base, who are they? Not only is it the actual left-wing base, it's also millennials and independents. So they're just like, yeah, leave out the young people. What? Why would you do that? Because they're trying to force feed you this on purpose. They're trying to force feed you Joe Biden 2020. And by the way, you would think that in an article about Joe Biden running for president, I don't know, maybe they would add a line or two about the fucking 1,001 times he already ran for president and he got his fucking ass handed to him on a silver platter. I mean, the dude ran, and when Obama won, he ran. He got like fucking 1% of the vote. This has happened repeatedly. Oh, yeah, oh, Joe Biden, look at it, he's definitely going to do well. Oh, shit, he got destroyed. He's VP Joe Biden. That's the furthest he's got, that's the furthest he's going to get. But they don't even add that Bernie Sanders did way better running for president than Joe Biden did. And none of the articles in establishment media are like, well, obviously Bernie Sanders is the favorite in 2020. Look at the movement he's created. He won 22 states last time. He got 47% of the vote last time with the DNC rigging it against him. None of the establishment media articles are saying that. I've seen articles on 2020 that mention everybody except Bernie Sanders for 2020. They've mentioned fucking Mark Cuban and Howard Schultz and Michael Bloomberg. There is zero grassroots support for Michael Bloomberg. Zero, bitch. So these are all... None of this is organic. It is all Joe Biden's people reaching out to the establishment media. Let's try to get his name out there. Let's try to make the 2020 rumblings a thing. And then they're so out of touch, they don't even realize, like, oh, if we were to go down that path, obviously Joe would have to pretend to be further left than he is. Obviously, that's where the momentum in the party is. They're too stupid to even get that. Guys, fucking Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker even understand, and they're corporatists, but even they understand, well, obviously I got to pretend like I'm further left than I am in order to get elected. Duh, look where all the momentum is. But Joe Biden is so goddamn out of touch, and his team is so out of touch, they're like, I got it. Let's pretend like it's 1996 and run a campaign like it's 96 and pretend like we're so moderate and reasonable and centrist. If only a politician had tried that. A legacy politician who's beloved by the establishment tried to be a centrist moderate in a recent election. How did that go? That's right. That was Hillary Clinton. She got destroyed. Oh my God. It's so frustrating, guys. It really is. Listen, they are going to pull out every fucking trick in the book to try to defeat Bernie Sanders, and you need to know that. We need to double and triple and quadruple our grassroots effort for Bernie Sanders in the upcoming election. I think he's going to run, and he is going to get maligned in mainstream media. They're going to shame him. Oh my God, Bernie, you're too old. You're too radical. You can't do this, yada, yada. Joe Biden's a year younger than Bernie Sanders. Not a single fucking article mentions his age. So what we need to do, I'm telling you, man, we need to bypass corporate media, establishment media. We need to stick with each other and spread the word through new media, through social media platforms. And unfortunately, they're cracking down on these outlets too. But we have to find a way, because the way that Bernie Sanders can win in 2020 and in the Democratic primary is he has to trump the Democratic field. I mean it in both senses of the word Trump, in the sense that he has to be so overwhelming in his victory that even with them pulling all the stops to try to prevent him from winning, they can't do it. That's what happened with Donald Trump. You have to remember the GOP lined up behind, okay, oh shit, all right, Jeb Bush is our first choice. Oh my God, Jeb Bush got destroyed in the most embarrassing fashion I've ever seen in my life. Okay, Marco Rubio, we're going to go to Marco Rubio. Marco, good? Okay, but Marco, oh shit, Marco Rubio's getting destroyed. John Kasich? I mean, he's probably not going to win, but let's try. Oh my God, John Kasich got destroyed. Okay, fine, we'll fucking take Cruz. Shit, Ted Cruz got destroyed. Oh God, Trump won. You don't think the establishment's going to do that? On the Democratic side, they'll start with, back up Biden. Biden's going to get destroyed. Okay, Biden got destroyed. Maybe Michael Bloomberg. Oh, shit. Bloomberg's doing even worse than Biden did. Okay, Kamala Harris. Yes, Kamala Harris. Oh, my God, she didn't do it. Oh, but anybody but Bernie. So we have to be the ones to drive home our narrative, because guess what? Our narrative is correct. The only way to beat the fake populists on the right is the populist left. And the fucking mainstream media doesn't even understand that populism isn't the pejorative they think it is. Because they're still trying to drive home that, populism. So that's why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are the same thing. No, that's not true that they're the same thing. And also, Donald Trump is not actually a populist. Bernie Sanders is a populist. And you're maligning it, but what does that show? Because what's the opposite of populism? Elitism. So the fact that mainstream media is anti-populist, what they're saying is, we're pro-elitist. And I don't even think they'd admit that to you. But that's the framing. The framing is populism bad, therefore elitism good. Like, the ordinary guy doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about or what the fuck they're doing. So obviously we need to go to these rich people who've run everything into the ground in the first place. We need to rely on them for decision making. You fucking idiots. They're never going to learn. They're never going to learn. And that's why these outlets are shitting the bed, and that's why outlets like ours are growing despite the game being rigged against us. So prepare yourself, because there will be so many maddening articles about how awesome Joe Biden is and about how awesome corporate Democrats are that are just an outright denial of reality and grassroots support. We all know the real grassroots support is going to be with the populist left candidates.